This is like having Thanksgiving every day.
I know, but better because it's not Thanksgiving.
The hotel wasn't nice to your father. We're staying here.
When's dinner gonna be ready? Okay, yeah. I think you'd have a better chance catching the football if you put the phone down!
Yeah!
5-second rule. Yeah, this is much better.
Slow roasted and carved thick. Oscar Mayer Carving Board gives you all the taste of the holidays without all the hassle. It's holiday, any day food. It's Oscar Mayer.
Hey, Stephanie.
What's up, Steve? I'm forgetting how close we are to Thanksgiving. Where is time flying to?
Well, I'm here to remind you that Thanksgiving is about 2 weeks away, young lady. So make sure you don't do any of the things that happened on that little video clip that we just showed.
Well, we don't eat turkey in this house, so that won't be happening.
So what does a vegan family eat for Thanksgiving?
We get a whole bunch of different like side dishes, and we get a little crazy and get some like fake plant-based turkey meat. Especially my husband, that was his favorite holiday meal, was Thanksgiving meal. So I try to go extra all out. My friends will bring over some snacks and some good meals, and we'll just bring everything together, and it'll be fun. Always plenty of food. Don't worry, we don't starve.
Yeah, mashed potatoes and gravy and stuff like that. All right.
Yeah.
Stuffing.
Stuffing, I love stuffing. I love stuffing. Then a bunch of different vegetables. We'll have different pies. So it's all the things. I mean, realistically, Thanksgiving is only a little bit about the turkey. Like, we make a big deal about the turkey, but like you have a little bit of the turkey, and then you have all the side stuff. So we have a lot more of the side stuff, and then we have a little bit of the pretend turkey, if you will.
Okay, pretend turkey. Well, in an Italian household, you have a little pasta, and then you have a little this, a little that. 3 hours later, then you sit down for turkey, and then you have dessert. It's like 11 o'clock already, and people are still eating. It's like,
oh my gosh.
So
I've been to some holidays at some Italian houses, and you have to not eat for like 2 days beforehand between the pasta dish and the antipasta dish and the this and the that. Yeah, you got to have a little everything.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, this is Kick Unhealthy Relationships to the Curb. We're here every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's Stephanie McPhail. I'm Steve Vaccaro, and together we try to, look at those toxic relationships and kind of make better ones, but also have folks make better choices. And Stephanie, you have a book. Why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about your book?
Sure. My book is called Being Loved Shouldn't Hurt. I wrote it, actually it's been about 3 years now since I wrote it. And I really wanted to share not only my story of how I overcame the cycle of toxic relationships, but how others can do exactly the same thing. So included in there is some other inspirational stories of people who not only overcame unhealthy relationships, but are now thriving after them. And I actually have a workbook now as well for anyone who would like to work alongside the book and dive deeper into their own healing.
Wow. And our expert guest here, Sarah K. Ramsey, is right up your alley there.
Oh yeah, Sarah and I now have known each other for I want to say a few years. It's been a while. We've shared the stage a bunch of different times because we have a similar mission of being able to help people stop that cycle of toxic relationships. So it's going to be great to have her on the show and share all of her knowledge with all of our viewers.
Well, I only know Sarah about 10 minutes, baby, but we've dressed the same way. So I don't know. You didn't get the memo today. I don't know what's going on, Stephanie.
Yeah, I'm feeling a little bit out of the loop. I mean, those of you haven't met Sarah yet, but she came in. She was obviously right in tune with us because you're going to see her headshot and you're going to see how she's dressed compared to Steve, and you're going to be like, "Yep, we're all in the same wavelength."
That's right. We're all in the same wavelength. But today, it's all about giving back, and that's what we do as a network. Before we share with a little bit what I did today, our network, our mission statement on the network, we just kind of revamped it a little bit. So our network, our overall vision is to unconditionally empower, assist others during adverse, traumatic, and challenging transitions in life through network, collaboration, support, and a platform to do that in. So I'm so very proud of the work that we're doing as a network. We have over 20 shows, and it's a way of giving back. It's a nonprofit program that's been in existence for several years now, and together we're advocates for advocates. So I'm really proud of all the work that we're doing. And Stephanie, that's what you do through and through.
I love being a part of this organization, and that's why, I love that I can help others. I mean, that's the biggest thing, right? Is using our pain to help others. And I think that's really what your organization does, is to help people really thrive no matter what they've experienced before.
That's right. And we're in New York. I know Sarah's in Florida. She's from Tennessee. You're from New York. You're in Texas. But today, and I know you're not a sports person, but the New York Mets have an annual food drive. And today we were able to give back some food to the Mets, to give it back to the Queens community there. So that's me delivering some food to the folks over at Citi Field. And that's Joe there. He loads up the trucks, and I got to meet him today. Great guy. And when you put it on a table, you sign in, and there we go. We're just getting food back to families in need. And we're still battling this pandemic, so it's such a big cause to give back. I know, Stephanie, it's important for you to give back as well.
I wonder when you sleep, Steve, because you're always out there helping others and food drives and all these drives for different things. Like, do you sleep at all?
Well, I used to sleep on Wednesdays between 5 and 6, but then we have this show. So
Can't do it.
I don't sleep now. I don't know what to do. So
well, you're Batman. Batman doesn't like to sleep, right?
Batman, but you're Wonder Woman, and you have Captain America as a husband.
Captain Marvel.
Oh,
Captain Marvel.
Sorry. Oh, there we go. Here we go. So you're the real superhero there, but it's great. But we're talking about toxic relationship here today, and there's a little thing I want to put up on the screen just to kind of review to our viewers out there about 4 signs you're in a toxic relationship. And we'll get Sarah to comment on this. But if you could comment before we bring Sarah on, Stephanie, control issues, communication problems, walking on eggshells, you're the bad guy. Does that hit home in any way?
Oh my gosh. It's actually, it so hits home because it's what I deal with every single client that I work with. But I was right before we went live, I was working with a client, and she's in the process of learning how to date after toxic relationships. And she was wondering, there was this guy that she was interested in, and he's not communicating. And I said, sweetheart, remember that this is the best it's ever going to be. So if he's not communicating with you now, how's it going to be in a long-term relationship? And so we forget these things. She's like, I'm just thinking that I'm needy, or I'm asking too much. And I'm like, sending a text message is not a hard thing to do. Right. Letting someone know that you're interested, checking in on them is not a hard thing to do if you actually are interested. And so learning how to end a relationship when it's not going the way we want it to, like we've tried, especially that early on, for her it's early on, ending it before we waste any more time feels really difficult at the time when we've only dealt with unhealthy, and this person seems like, hey, they're much better than what I've experienced before. Her gut is telling her there's something wrong, and I could see it going in all the directions of what you just showed on the screen, because already early on, the communication isn't there. So it's not going to get better from there.
And out of the 4, Stephanie, your line of work, what's the most challenging for you to kind of empower women or men in a toxic relationship?
I mean, they're all 4 of them, control issues, walking on eggshells, you're the bad guy. I mean, they love to manipulate. They love to turn it around and make it seem like we're the one who's got the problem. Walking on eggshells, they like to keep us on edge, so they're constantly questioning ourselves. Again, that keeps us around, because then we don't know what's truthful. We don't know what's right, because, hey, they're telling us that we're wrong. They're telling us that, what we're doing is bad. And so we're constantly worried that we're going to have a fight or an argument with them. The controlling, again, like I had an ex telling me that they didn't like the way I talked. They didn't like the way I dressed. They didn't like who I hung out with. So all those things coming up, again, you hear it all the time. You start to lower your shine, as I call it. You start to diminish yourself because you're feeling like, hey, whatever I'm doing is wrong. You just feel wrong all the time. And then communication, there's no such thing as too much communication in a relationship. So if your partner is saying that, you're communicating too much, you keep telling me what's wrong, which makes me feel like I'm the bad guy all the time, it's just them not trying to deal with their own bad behavior and work on themselves. So, I would say all 4 parts are really a big deal.
And TV co-hosts have to have a healthy relationship too. I think you and I have a healthy relationship. What do you think?
I would say so, definitely. I like hanging out with you. And for anyone who's watching this for the first time, hopefully you'll want to stick around and watch us, continue to watch us, because we do go live every Wednesday, but we also are on cable on Fridays, Wait, what time on Fridays?
At 6 p.m., 6 p.m., right.
p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So come and hang out with us. We'd love to see you regularly and you know, come share what you learned from us and these amazing guests we have on every week.
Well, speak about amazing guests. Sarah K. Ramsey is our first guest. And check out this bio of hers, and then we'll bring her right on. We'll show a few pictures of her. Sarah K. Ramsey is a toxic relationship specialist and the world's leading expert on how to become toxic person proof. She is best-selling author of the book Becoming Toxic Person Proof and host of a globally acclaimed podcast. She works with women who have experienced toxic relationships and who remain stuck in a cycle of pain and confusion, transform their minds and lives by taking back their power, recreating a life they are excited about living, and bringing renewed energy, clarity, and excellence into establishing careers and relationships they love. Her work has been featured in the Emotional Abuse Recovery and Resilience Summit, Healing Narcissistic Trauma Conference, Thrive Global, the Elephant Journal, and the Courageous Women Summit. You can contact her, Sarah, at sarahkramsey.com. So let's bring in our expert guest here. Sarah, you there?
I am here and excited to chat. How are you guys?
Yes, thank you very much.
I'm just noticing when Carmine brought us back in, so now I've got the blue sandwich.
Yeah, so
Look how good it looks.
I know. I see, Sarah. The secret is the truth is I send Stephanie these emails, but she's so busy helping people. She doesn't check my email. I told her to wear blue, and she doesn't wear blue. I don't know.
Well, at least I showed up in appropriate outfits.
There we go. There we go. There we go. But Sarah, we put up a graph. I want to start with that because Stephanie had to be able to make some comments. If we could put that graph up, those 4 things. Sarah, comment on that as well.
I would love to comment on that. And I think about the words like Teflon, like a non-stick pan. Okay, so anytime you're trying to talk to a toxic person and say, this bothered me, this, upset me, something happened, it's like Teflon. They just slide it back to you. It's always your fault. You're always the bad guy. And in a toxic relationship, the toxic person gets to make the rules, and the toxic person gets to break the rules, and the toxic person gets to enforce the rules. And your job is to follow the rules, which is why you always feel like the bad guy, which is why you think you're walking on eggshells, which is why you feel like there's a communication problem. And Lundy Bancroft, he said, you don't have a he's the author of Why Does He Do That? Inside the Minds of Angry and Controlling Men, which is probably the best-selling book on this subject. And he said, you don't have a communication problem, you have a control problem.
Oh, okay.
It's all about control. Let me make the rules. Let me enforce the rules. You follow the rules and don't worry about what I'm doing. You worry about what you're doing. And that's my mission, is to change the face of toxic relationships. I'm guessing, I hope that Stephanie and I appear to be somewhat put together, intelligent people, and there's this idea that toxic relationships only happen in certain socioeconomic groups, certain races, certain situations, certain whatever it is, whatever your stereotype or the past typical stereotype is for toxic relationships. I know that people like Stephanie and I are out to here to broaden this conversation and broaden the horizon and say, I've had Harvard grads who are in toxic relationships. I've had several people from Columbia graduate. It's a very, if you're very conscientious and wanting to do the right thing, you can develop something called a smart girl or smart guy syndrome, okay? Which is very different than codependency. We've probably talked a lot about codependency on here. And codependency is the idea that I'm so broken, I must have you, okay? Smart girl or smart guy syndrome is, I've never failed at anything. I can just work harder to make this relationship work. I can just walk on eggshells better. I can communicate better. I can take being the bad guy and fix my behavior, and it'll fix this relationship. It's something drastically different than just being needy and having to be in a relationship. It's truly having your strengths used against you. Mm-hmm.
Wow, Stephanie, what do you think what Sarah's saying?
She was just calling me out because, man, that was I was like, oh, it resonates. resonates. Yeah, I mean, that's what, I share with my clients, because I think that before I was in a toxic relationship, that happened to those people in my mind, whatever those people were. It wasn't me. And I didn't understand how people that were like me could get into those types of toxic relationships. So therefore I couldn't. And because I was successful in every other area of my life, I was going to just figure it out just like I had in everything else I'd ever done. So if I just do the right research, like you said, walk on the right eggshells, like do all those things, I can figure this out and make it okay. I can finally make him understand what he's doing to be wrong so that we can fix this and move on. But I was the only one working on anything. He wasn't. I was the one doing all of the work, and nothing was changing. It was getting worse, because he even told me, in the moments of clarity he would have, he said, I didn't respect you for sticking around. Like, he would tell me that and then it would turn around. Of course, that would disappear. But yeah, so he wouldn't respect me for sticking around, and then it just got worse.
Wow.
And I want to change that conversation, because that idea of, oh, I didn't think toxic relationships happened to people like me. I think about it as, can you imagine if within the study of cancer, we only studied it in the stage 4 stages?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So domestic violence is something I think about like stage 4 cancer. When someone is having broken bones or bruises, or they're in the hospital, we're talking stage 4 cancer. And that doesn't mean we don't, as a society, need to talk about precancerous cells, stage 1 cancer, stage 2 cancer. And these conversations about walking on eggshells, controlling, always being the bad guy, are cancer in its early stages. But those are the preventable stages, right? And that's the conversation. I want to bring it back to the precancerous cells and all these things, because I feel like too much of the focus in our society, the common idea, stereotype focused, is really only in stage 4 cancer.
Wow. And we have some comments out there. Jackie said, this is great and very much needed. Some people don't even realize they're in a toxic relationship. Healing is important at the getting out of a toxic relationship. A couple of people that follow you, Sarah. Sarah rocks. She is awesome. She has helped me go from surviving to thriving. What's the most challenging and rewarding thing that you have working with people? And what's the secret to establishing rapport from the get?
Okay, so the secret to establishing rapport from the get is exactly what happened with Stephanie. So I described her situation not better than she did. She's an expert in this field too, but it was instantly, I just introduced a brand new concept. She probably never heard that word before. And instantly she said, yes, that was me. She's talking about me. And I do strive to be an excellent communicator in that area of starting rapport. So I developed rapport within 30 seconds of a brand new concept. The hardest and most challenging thing is getting people to turn their head. After a toxic relationship, there is an obsession with narcissism, an obsession with personality disorders, an obsession with gaslighting. Like, what happened to me? And that is a fabulous place to visit. That is fabulous for processing. That is not the final goal, not the final chapter as what we're talking about here. That should be one chapter in your book. And so really teaching people to turn their head, okay? And yes, that was really terrible. And what's going to be next for you? Like, what are your dreams? What are your goals? What are your aspirations? What do you want? What is your next stage of life? Because if you've been in a toxic relationship for 10 years, it was all about them. And then I see people go through healing strategies that are all about the toxic person again. And I say, what are you doing to get over this toxic person encounter? I'm researching narcissism. I'm obsessing over personality disorders. I'm going in groups where they talk about toxic people. I'm studying gaslighting. It's like, okay, so the way you're trying to get over them and get control back of your head is to study them. Is that what I'm understanding? And they usually giggle at that point and say, okay, maybe that doesn't make sense. But it's a trauma response. It's trying to process confusion for years and years of our lives, or maybe it's months, maybe it's your childhood, maybe it's your toxic best friend, maybe it's a toxic boss. You know, whatever it is, you're trying to process what happened. And getting people out of processing and eventually getting them into progressing. And
Right.
that's where the beautiful stuff happens.
Right. And Stephanie, would you agree with that? Because sometimes we get caught up with the process. We get caught up with, what needs to be done, and we forget how to make progress. And there's got to be an appropriate timeline to transition, if I hear what Sarah's saying correctly, to transition to get to make that progress. Would you agree with that, Stephanie?
I think that what's the natural way for most of us to do it is because this is what I see with my clients all the time too is and I did this. Let me do all the research on what they did so that I can understand, because again, they make us feel like we're crazy. So, we've been wrong all the time. We don't know what we're talking about. It's all our fault, all those things. So it's like, let me learn and find out. Like when I read the book Codependent No More, I was like, oh my gosh, that's those things. Like, okay, those are some things. And I read about narcissism. Oh my gosh. And I read about borderline personality disorder. I'm like, oh yes, and all these things started coming out. And I finally understood what was going on. And then I wasn't the only one, because I think that's another thing too, is that when you feel like you're the only one going through it, you feel really isolated. You feel like nobody else understands what you're going through. So then we shrink back and lose our voice even more.
Yeah, and I agree completely. I think about it as an island to visit, but it's not the final destination. And everybody needs to go through that island of, oh, I wasn't crazy. Oh, I'm not alone. Oh, okay, this did happen to other people. It's a fabulous island, but sometimes it can be a scary island to get off of, because if you're
Sure.
codependent and it's been about your parents, it's been about your kids, it's been about whatever, and then it has to be about you.
Hmm. Hmm. Now you brought up the word scary, and you have a little segment on what you do called 5 Minute Miracle. Explain
Yeah.
that a little bit.
So part of my podcast, the Toxic Person Proof podcast, I have amazing guests on all the time. Pretty much any book on this subject, that author has been a host on, or I have hosted them on my podcast. But sometimes I just do 5 minute miracles. That 5 minute hit of information, of clarity, of hope. It's one of my favorite things to do within my podcast.
Wow. Well, I asked you to pick out one, and you mentioned scary. I think this one, Five
So,
Minute Miracle, focuses on fear. Correct?
absolutely. And what we are afraid of and what we should be afraid of.
Okay, well, let's check it out. We're going to play this in entirety because we want to get a little piece in your world and how you can connect with people, and maybe some new viewers out there would benefit from the work that you do. So let's check this out. 5 Minute Miracle. Sarah.
Wonderful. This is Sarah, and I was recently asked what I was afraid of. And because I'm on a lot of podcasts and put myself out there and try to create change pretty rapidly in my own life, this person asked what I was afraid of. And they were saying it as if I didn't have any fear. And I said, oh, no, there's something I'm absolutely terrified of. And they were like, oh, what is it? Kind of getting the insight into that. And they said, what are you terrified of? And I said, I'm afraid of having the same problems year after year. And I heard someone saying that one time, because they said, of course you're going to have problems. This is life. But if you have different problems year after year, then you're making change. You're growing. You're taking inventory of what's going on in your life and taking steps to improve it. But let's say you have lunch with your best friend once a year. Only once a year. It can be on September 10th. So every September 10th, you have lunch with your friend. And you say, I'm having so much trouble in my business. Oh no, what's going on? I'm having so much trouble in my business. I can't stand this person I work for. Then the next year, oh, I'm having so much trouble in my business. I can't stand this person I work for. And then the next year, oh, I'm just having so much trouble in my business. I can't stand who I work for. Then the next year, right? You see how that's not a life that's growing. That's not a life that's changing. That's not a life that's moving. That's someone who's talking about their problems rather than solving their problems. And I have been this person before. I have been the person who every time I talk to someone or connected with a friend, oh, guess what? It's the same problems over and over and over again. I'm having the same issues. I'm not solving anything. I'm walking in circles. I'm not moving forward. But I started to get really, really afraid of being in Groundhog Day, of living as that version of myself over and over. I got really afraid of always being sad. I got really afraid of not going after my purpose. I got really afraid of putting up with bad behavior from tons of people. I got really afraid of not being able to look myself in the mirror because I had lost touch with my self-integrity. I was terrified of things staying the same. Of waking up 5 years, 10 years, 20 years with the exact same set of problems I had already been dealing with for the last 5, 10, 20 years. I didn't want that to be my whole life. And I saw other people and they were changing their lives. And I know for some people the word change is really scary. But I found that interesting, even the idea of comfort zone, right? So you talk about someone is in their comfort zone, but then they describe their comfort zone, say it's a problem at work. Oh, I'm miserable at work. I'm so tired all the time. I never have any help. I'm always fighting with my kids. I'm always fighting with my spouse. I'm always miserable. I'm always just so unhappy. And they call that their comfort zone. Not until you ask them to take a step to change. And I think if I had a magic wand and could change something about humanity, I would teach people to be as afraid of what happens if they keep going down the path they're going as they are of changing paths. And there's that old phrase, the devil you know is better than the devil you don't. And you can choose that. You can say, oh, I've got these problems. I'm going to have them next year. I'm going to have them the next year. The rest of my life is going to be circling around with these same problems. But that probably seems pretty sad. And it certainly was to me. It was really scary to think about not changing, to think about not doing anything, to think about not coming from a different place in my life, to think about not making a difference in my life. You've got to do the hard work of your own life. No one else can jump in and save you. So today, take 30 seconds, a minute, and think about a problem that maybe you've had year after year. That if you're honest with yourself, if you were meeting your friend this time next year, you'd probably sit down and say, guess what? I've got the same problem. And then get real and think, what happens if it doesn't change? What's the almost probable certain future of continuing to go on as I'm going on right now? And get scared about that. Don't get scared about change. There's hope in change. There's not hope in doing the same thing over and over again and hoping to get different results. If you always do what you have always done, then you're going to keep having the life you currently have. Get into the comfort zone, which means creating change so you have a different set of problems, a better set of problems. And there was someone who once said, if you have $1 million, you have money problems, and if you have $1, you have money problems. But if you have $1 million, you have a much better set of money problems. So in this life, there will always be problems, but get a better set of problems rather than having the same problems over and over. Hope that helps.
Wow, well said. Well said. And I love how you, when you speak, you pause, you have great eye contact, and you really emphasize the points you're trying to make. And I think that really hits home. And you can feel, and Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong, you can feel the passion in when she talks, and that really connects with the viewers out there. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, that for me was the most important thing. Was for me, it was my birthday. Every year on my birthday, I would look and say, this is, and I remember thinking to myself, because I got married when I was 28, and I thought I was so much older than all my other friends who got married. And, and so actually, I got found at 28, got married at 29, so much worse. And then every year that it was like things were going wrong, and I was like, but I'm 30, but I'm 31, but I'm 32. And I remember getting to 34, and I was like, wow, this is going to be the rest of my life. I'm going to keep feeling this over and over again. And at one point, my mom said to me, how much longer are you going to live this way? You live another 50 years? You're going to do this all the time for the rest of your life? And I was like, oh God. And there were moments where I thought I really, and this is horrible to say, but like I was kind of hoping one of us would die. Like one of us will die. Maybe that'll get me out of it. And there, because it almost felt like that was easier than to think about making the big break and ending the relationship. Because I thought, like, we're married, we have to stay married. I grew up going to church every Sunday. You make it work, you make it happen. And so, there was all this fear that I had that I was going to be old and alone and never have a family like I wanted, and all of those things. So I completely, I empathize with what you were talking about there. And it really, that for me was a big piece of why I said, I have to do something different than what I'm doing now. I can't have another birthday saying the same exact thing that I've said every year for all this time.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that was the clip we went with, because that's exactly what has caused me to create change in my own life. It's like, wait, I keep saying the same thing. And sometimes within the toxic relationship conversation, we talk about the toxic voice within our head. If you have your self-critic or something like that, or your mom's critical voice in your head, or your dad's or something like that. And I save my critical voice in my head for a very specific topic, which is, Sarah, why do you keep doing the same thing over and over again and hoping to get different results? Whether it's my health practices, my wealth practices, my professional practices, my relationship practices, I can either do the same thing over and over again, which is going to keep getting me the same results, which in some things in my life are great. I was a piano major in my undergrad, and I practiced piano over and over and over again, and could play Beethoven sonatas and Chopin nocturnes. I practiced and did the same thing over and over again, and it built the ability to play the piano. But sometimes we're building the ability to put up with bad behavior, or we're building the ability to ignore the things happening to us, or we're building the ability to live in survival. And those are not skills I want to foster.
Right. And this is Take on Healthy Relationships to the Curve. That's Stephanie McPhail, Steve Vaccaro. That's our expert guest, Sarah K. Ramsey. We're here every Wednesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But overcoming fear for people, that's not easy to do, Sarah. So how do you start that process with the people that you work with, or our new viewers out there? If they have a fear factor that's really affecting them, it's really stagnating them, what would you recommend for them to overcome and achieve to get to a next step?
Steve, you were like talking about things I'm like salivating to be able to answer. This was like a training I did last week. I'm working on my next book, which is a book about problem solving. So decision making, problem solving, getting past fear. And I recognized that I needed a new way of explaining some of these concepts. So this is new, and it's been very successful with my ladies so far. So one of the things I want you to do is separate emotional problems from practical problems. Okay, if you're leaving a toxic marriage, like Stephanie was talking about, there's a practical problem of where am I going to live? or how am I going to get him out, or how am I going to protect myself financially? Those are practical problems to solve. And there are emotional problems to solve, like, will my church, how will I deal with my church not accepting me because I'm dealing with a divorce? Okay. And even that one concept of like, okay, is this a practical problem or is this an emotional problem? Even something that simple has had such fabulous results because it doesn't feel like that fear is all a jumble, right? I talk about spaghetti thinking versus waffle thinking. Okay, little waffle squares, we can cut it up. Steve, I'm kind of jealous that you have pasta at your Thanksgiving. I feel like my family needs to really bump it up a few notches. My family's a big pasta family, so we're obviously going to have to incorporate that, especially as an appetizer. Spaghetti as an appetizer? Are you kidding me right now?
Right?
Yeah.
Extra carbs? Yes.
Yes.
Hey, we're going to talk about food now? Okay.
Healthy relationships with food.
There we go.
That was last week's one for me. But when you think about spaghetti, it is just so messy. And one noodle, you try to pull it out, and everything falls off the plate, and it's all messy. And so when you are problem stacking, I can't do this because of this, and I can't do this because of this, and I can't do this and this and this and this and this. You do that problem stacking, you are never going to move forward. Okay, and there is a component of fear, but it's also a component of overwhelm, which we procrastinate or self-sabotage because with every problem where we like glue them all together or jumble them like spaghetti all together, it almost becomes, I don't want to say an excuse in the context of what we're talking about, because the difficulties of leaving a toxic relationship, that is not something I want to minimize. So I'm not minimizing that. I'm not victim blaming in any way. It is a terribly, terribly difficult situation to overcome. And at the same time, I bet when you start listening to friends, you'll start saying, oh, they're problem stacking. Like, I can't do it. Well, but I can't do that. But I can't do that. But I can't, it's a natural human component. Or they're jumbling their emotional problems and practical problems all together. So if you can just start separating it, I think about a waffle and all the little boxes. And when I dip into spaghetti, it's going to make a mess on my plate. It's going to be great in my mouth, maybe not so much on my lap or my shirt. But when you have like a waffle square, like a Belgian waffle, you cut off one piece. Okay, I'm going to do this one thing. I'm going to solve this one problem. I'm going to tackle this one fear. Okay, now I can move on to one more thing. It is a lot more successful way to overcome fear than jumbling it all together or problem stacking.
Wow, yeah. You bring up the fact that, sometimes I had a client today, actually, we're talking, and she really didn't want to talk about the past about things, and she just wanted to go right to the future, right? How do we change things around? So when you have a situation like that where maybe it's been traumatic or difficult or challenging about the past, are you cautious about going back there? I'll ask Stephanie and Sarah, or do you go right into it so you can move from that?
Well, I'm a coach, not a therapist. And I know, Steve, you appreciate the difference in what I am trained to do and what is appropriate for me to do and then what is not appropriate for me to do. So I'm a little different probably in the conversations with my clients than you, Steve. But I ask them, I'm a real fan on staying on topic. Okay. And Stephanie, Steve, I know you've seen this. You ask the client something, and it's like those ketchup packets, like you get from a fast food restaurant, and you lay a ketchup packet and say, let's talk about your relationship with your mother, or let's talk about work, or let's talk about what problem you're trying to solve. And it's like they step on it, and the tomato like squirts out everywhere, and all of a sudden it's like, how are we talking about this? And how do we get here? And it's fascinating how our brains divert when there's something uncomfortable. However, I'm going to bring it back to gaslighting. In many ways, those communication problems that are happening in toxic relationships are when you try to have a conversation with them, bring up a problem, bring up a concern, bring up a feeling, and they change the subject to it being your fault. Or, well, if you hadn't done this, then I wouldn't have had to do this. So I know it's very simple to say, no, let's stay on topic. Let's really get back to what problem we're trying to solve. But it's a fabulous way of helping people become toxic personhood. Because in future communication and future relationships, and they're saying, it really bothered me when you were 2 hours late and I didn't get a phone call. Well, it wouldn't have, but you'll notice. If you learn how to stay on topic, you will notice very quickly when people are trying to divert, they're trying to gaslight, they're trying to minimize, because it's really as simple as learning how to stay on topic. And if you can stay on topic with yourself, you'll really protect yourself in the future.
Right. That's a key point, right? So you have to stay on topic, because then you giving the dialogue becomes very emotionally charged, and you're coming off topic, and then all sorts of things are coming up, right, Stephanie?
Well, there's a lot of avoidance,
right?
And what I think I've noticed too, or what I have noticed as well, is the avoidance of what responsibility do I have in all of this. And, that's always a tough thing to bring up, because I didn't deserve the physical abuse and emotional abuse that I got in my, first marriage. Obviously didn't deserve any of that. But because of that, I added to my repertoire of negative coping skills that I was using at the time to deal with it. And some of it was avoidance. I don't want to deal with what's going on, and I don't want to, not that I didn't want to take responsibility. I'll say that. And that, so, even when I ended that relationship, there were things that I had to really unlearn, and how to take responsibility for me and what I was doing. And I think I've shared this story before, but, I was newly married to my wonderful, amazing husband, and things were really good. And we had just had a second baby. And I decided that with my half sister, in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to go do a half marathon. I made all these plans. I made flight arrangements. I did it all. And my husband listened from the other room, and he's like, did you just make a flight and full trip with the kids and you to Colorado in 4 months? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, listen, I'm never going to tell you not to do that, but just in the future, do me a favor and let me know ahead of time that you're going to do that. And I was like, and so he called me out, and I took about 5 minutes to really, I was like, whoa, why did I do that? Because that wasn't respectful. That wasn't cool for me to do that. And what was it? Why did I do that? Well, on reflection, I realized I tried to avoid a possible problem that wasn't him. It was my ex that would have given me a problem about trying to make plans and do something. So I'm going to just do it and then deal with him being angry later. But none of that was related to my current relationship. And so I got to come back and say, and I had learned that behavior, because it was going to, my ex would have given me a hard time. You're making plans, I don't want, then, it would have been a big, huge fight. So I went to my now husband and I said, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You're 100% right. I will never do that again. He was like, listen, I will never tell you not to go and do a half marathon. I'll never tell you not to travel. That's what I love about you. But just let me in it, let me in the loop. And I was like, you're 100% right. So just an example of those things, I had to unlearn. My responsibility was not to put my old stuff on my new relationship, and learn how to communicate better without being worried to walk on eggshells, because I didn't have to do that in this current relationship.
I agree so strongly. And I want to say, if you have had a toxic romantic relationship and you think the solution to your healing is getting on dating apps, the stuff Stephanie's talking about is exactly why people end up cycling into other toxic relationships, or take a pretty good relationship. And then it ends up being toxic, not because you're with a narcissist, but because of old patterns bumping up against each other. So that is why just getting into another relationship, we can't skip the healing process. And I'm going to be a little mean to people, not mean, to people who've been into those toxic relationships. And I want to say, because sometimes I hear, well, I need someone to love me just for me. And I'm like, yes. And at the same time, it is also your responsibility to bring the best version of you into your new relationship. Not just think, well, I want to avoid doing my own work, so I'm just going to find someone else and hope they put up with my bad behavior. That's exactly what toxic people do.
Mm-hmm.
There's a meme that's going out there right now that I cringe every single time. And it's something like, I'm going to get it wrong, but this is about what it is. It's something to the effect of, I need someone to love me because I love me extra special because I'm extra needy, and they need to be aware of that. It's like something like that. And I'm like, oh God, that's awful. Like, no, how about we fix that neediness so that you don't attract those people that are going to be attracted to that? Like that, no, let's fix all of that, because you're 100% right. If you don't heal the parts of you that have been in like these toxic relationships in the past, you're going to keep recreating it. Even if the person's not a terrible person, but we come with this baggage, and the lack of communication is the biggest part that I think we really carry on with us. That passivity, that, people pleasing, some of that stuff that we learned in those toxic relationships, we've got to unlearn that in order to create, because, there's no such thing as too much communication in a healthy relationship. We've got to be prepared to be vulnerable. Toxic relationships don't allow us to be vulnerable.
Right.
Stephanie, so in your new relationship with your wonderful husband, are you saying you have to have hard conversations sometimes?
Heck yeah. We're,
Yes.
And that's the reality, right? Like, people think like, oh, it's just, everything's perfect. No, it is, because we talk all the time about everything. Oh, like, he knows more about me than anybody I've ever met in my entire life, and loves me for all of those, the deepest, darkest, whatever things I could think of, loves me for all those things. People forget that there's still communication that has to go on. There's not just happily ever after. You got to talk through that happily ever after.
That's right. That's right. And Sarah, the pandemic has really hit us hard in all ways, and I think life will never be the same. But in 10 years from now, we'll feel really the ramifications of the pandemic as well. Did you find the work that you've done during the pandemic was more intense, or how did you help people cope through a toxic relationship during isolation and quarantine time?
It brought up a lot of divorces, because so many people who had been able to use coping strategies to survive the relationship, and their coping strategies went away. Maybe they spent a lot of time with friends, or they were workaholics, or whatever else, and then they were faced with themselves. So we were all faced with ourselves. I had pretty healthy coping strategies in life coping, and I couldn't see my friends anymore. I couldn't go to lunch with my girlfriends. We all lost several coping strategies. But if you were in a toxic relationship, stuck in a toxic home, gosh, it just became so terrible. And so I just saw a lot of people deciding to end their relationships over the pandemic. And they were relationships that probably should have ended anyway. But it was an overwhelming last year and a half, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's your thoughts on 2022 coming up? What's your professional goals that you have, Sarah?
So I'm I'm really rebranding myself. I'm always going to do the toxic relationship work, but I love being a professional problem solver, breaking those emotional problems and practical problems, not bumping into toxic people problems. I joke that it's like, you can solve anything in the world except for getting a toxic person to change. You can't do it. Build wealth, build a business, do a hobby, write a book, whatever, rather than spending your energy trying to change. So it's very interwoven within that. But I am absolutely passionate. After a toxic relationship, you don't know yourself, and your decision making is typically very skewed, because all your decisions were based on the toxic person not being mad at you, just like Stephanie was talking about. And so releasing my next book on decision making and problem solving skills. I'm very excited about that.
That's awesome. So this is your second book?
Yes. Uh-huh.
That's exciting. Do you have a release date yet, or is it still kind of?
No, I'm running it through beta groups right now. My first book, Becoming Toxic Person Proof, I just put out there. I mean, it was a very quick process. And I'm going through women with a beta group right now, because I want to bump them up into their own life decisions and their own problems. And I'm trying to create a situation and a platform where their brain does what my brain does, because my brain goes emotional problem, logical problem, waffle it down. Here's what's happening right now. And if it's like, okay, how can I get other people's brains to do this when they feel overwhelmed, when they feel like they don't know what to do, when fear's overtaking them? We don't think about being decisive or being a problem solver, being a professional problem solver as kind of like on our resumes or life skills, unless you're in coding or something. But we all have to deal with problems. And if we can deal with them very quickly, the biggest thing I see, Stephanie, I know you see the same thing. It's like, I wish I had done something sooner. I wish I had made a decision sooner. I wish I had left that job 10 years ago. I wish I'd left that relationship 5 years ago. And I just see people delaying decisions so much that really are detrimental to them. So I want to give them tools and strategies to speed up the process in their own best interest.
I think for me that, people ask like, what's the hardest part of your job? And I think that the hardest part is just letting people know, like, act now and let's start creating that best life. Like, take the fear out and say, hey, we can do something different. Like this, it is possible for you to change. And once we do that, I can help you with all the other parts. I'm sure you feel like we can help you with all that other stuff. It's just deciding that you're going to do whatever it takes to create your best life, that you're going to do whatever it takes to heal and grow from these toxic relationships and never get back into it. And sometimes it's like, come on, like I see it, but I'm not going to, if you're not ready yet, that's what it is. And, sometimes too, there's that fear of like, but I've already wasted so much time. I'm 50, I'm 60, I'm 70. And I'm like, time's going to go by anyway. So you can either, it's the Shawshank Redemption. It's like, get busy living or get busy dying. Like, get out there and start creating that life that you want.
Well, it's funny, if you were investing in a stock that had lost money every single year. I'm really wanting to invest in the stock. It's been terrible for 20 years, but I'm really thinking just next year it's going to be different. People would say, why are you doing that? And we think about that sunk cost fallacy of, but I've already put so much time into this, which is even more reason not to waste any more time. That's exactly what that 5-minute miracle was about. It's like, yes, you've already lost 20 years. Are you going to lose 20 more? That's what I want people to be afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, that's such a vital piece to growth and moving forward. And the average podcast, a show that we do, that you do, Sarah, is 8 times. Now, Stephanie and I have surpassed that, and I'm sure you have too. Why is it important for you to move beyond the work that you do one-on-one to have a podcast, to bring people together? Why is that important for you to keep that going?
When I wrote out my life goals, I said I wanted to give the world a different language to navigate abuse. So that's where that smart girl, smart guy syndrome comes in. That's where spaghetti versus waffles or problem stacking. I try to give people this very sticky language to cut through some of the confusion, which toxic relationships are so confusing. So I want to just cut through where it's like, okay, spaghetti and waffles. I've never said that to anyone and they go, well, I don't ever have spaghetti thinking. I don't know what you're talking about. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. When I say smart girl syndrome, they're like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I did. So the podcast gives, in the book, it just gives you such a platform to put out this other language that really cuts through the confusion. And I think if we can change the language around toxic relationships and make it more simple, gaslighting is a very confusing term. Trauma bonding is a very confusing term. When I say, toxic people are always trying to get you off subject so they can blame you for it, people go, oh, okay, they can understand what that is, rather than, gaslighting is confusing. You have to go into this whole explanation of it. So the podcast and the book just give me such a platform to change the language and put that in people's ears.
Wow. This hour flew by. I can't believe it. There was so much information that we put out there. And Sarah, we want to thank you so very much. How can people get a hold of you, contact you, get your book, listen to your podcast, or get to wear blue like you and me?
Yeah, that's right. So if you Google toxic person proof, such as Googling, like bulletproof, toxic person proof, I am absolutely the first thing that's going to come up. You can Google my name too, of course. But my book is Becoming Toxic Person Proof, and my podcast is Toxic Person Proof. So that is a great way very easy, simple way to remember how to get into my world. And I'd also love to ask you to join my Facebook group, Finding Love and Success After a Toxic Relationship.
Wow. Stephanie, amazing guest here. Unbelievable. You have to come back
I
on.
found the cream of the crop. I mean, come on.
I
When
know.
Sarah said she was interested, I was like, heck yeah, come on, and let's hang out. Let's do this.
We're going to have to get her to come back.
Of course.
Would you come
I'm
back,
happy
Sarah?
to. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great.
This is a
All right.
great
So
conversation.
I'm throwing this out there. We're all wearing green tomorrow, Stephanie. Okay, make sure we're all wearing green. All right.
The little selfie.
Sarah, thank you so very much. God bless your efforts, and we'll see you down the road real soon.
Thank you, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Sarah K. Ramsey, amazing expert in healing toxic relationships. And Stephanie, right up your alley, like we said right before the show.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's being a successful woman who's successful in every other area of our lives except for relationships. We try to figure it out. We try to understand what needs to be done in order to fix the relationship. And, like we said during the interview, I mean, it's one of those things. I had a degree in psychology. I was a trained crisis counselor. I thought if I could just figure it out that I could fix it. But, like Sarah said, you're not fixing the other person. The only person that we can fix is ourselves. So spending all that time and energy worrying about the other person and what they've done wrong to us is a waste of energy. Use that energy instead to find someone like Steve, someone like Sarah, someone like me, someone that resonates for you to help you really focus on what you need to do to heal so that you can start thriving, like not just surviving, but thriving and really being the creator of your own best life.
Wow. And real quick, because Sarah answered this and I kind of answered too. Why do you like to do these shows and podcasts? Why is it? Because you do so much, but why is this aspect important to you?
This is important because I feel for me, this is a calling. So for me, I don't do this even because it's necessarily what I chose. I didn't grow up and say, hey, I want to help people heal from unhealthy relationships. But once I realized that I had to follow this calling, this pull to help others and break away that stigma of what toxic relationships looked like, who was affected by it, I realized that this was the pandemic before this current pandemic. So the more people we can reach, the more people we can shine a light and let them see they're not the only ones, the more people we can heal. So that's really why I do any of these podcast summits. Everything that I do is to help really throw that net out there and get as many people to see that they're not alone and that change is possible.
Wow, well, you do it very well, and you're such an expert. You're a true friend, and you connect with so many people on a day in and day out basis. So I'm thankful for the work that we do together. And Carmine, thank you for the excellent work you've done behind the scenes and going through some challenges in her life right now. So to put together a great show tonight, thank you, Carmine. And we'll see you next week. And Stephanie, I'm going to give you a list of wardrobe choices from now to next week. Please follow it. The color scheme,
You could wear a dress, Steve. I mean, if you want to.
All right.
You can dress how I am. I don't have to go towards what you want, Steve.
Wow, I think we need to do a show, just you and I, just hashing this out here. But this is Kick on Healthy Relationships to the Curb. It's been a great hour. I want to thank Sarah, Stephanie, Carmine, and all our viewers who chose to watch us. God bless. We'll see you next week.
Bye, everybody.